Buonasera a tutte.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation tonight. My name is Patrizia Fama. I'm in charge of public programs of the MUSE Museum. I would like to convey to you the greetings of the director, and I would like to thank the president, Mr. Stefano Zecchi, who came to Trento on this occasion. So I'll give the floor straight away to the president. I'd just like to say a few words. Well, first of all, I'd like to recall that this year, the Day of the Women has a title which is Towards a Planet which is 50-50 by 2030. So let's hope that this rate will come even earlier. And the topic aims at achieving the aims of sustainable development goals, in particular objectives 4 and 5, that is empowerment of women, and secondly, global access to quality training and continuous training. MUSE has always supported the relationship between development and environment and science. So it is natural for the museum, on the occasion of the Day of the Women, to promote science and scientific development, and above all, the development of women in science. So this evening, I have the pleasure to confirm the partnership between Museo delle Scienze and the Pezcoller Foundation in Trento, open to a public dialogue on the issue of science. I would like to thank Dr. Karen Vousden of the Cancer Research UK and Francis Crick London and Dr. Francesca Lorenzin of CIBIO Trento. And then I would like to thank Dr. Lucia Martinelli, who is also president of the European Platform of Women Scientists. So thank you. And I'll give the floor to the president of the Museo delle Scienze. Well, good evening, and thank you for coming so numerous. So you see that the Museo delle Scienze, the Museum of Sciences, is very keen on scientific research. It is open to all experiences and all possible opportunities. I'm glad to be here as president of the museum because this is good for Trento and it's good for Italy. Well, I wish all the best to all the women present here and to our scientists and researchers who are here with us. So we are here for an open conference to show that research is very much important, research on such significant and sensitive topics which have to do with the health of people, with the intimacy, I dare to say, of our existence. So thank you so much for focusing on this type of scientific research. And our society, thanks to this research, can progress and go on despite all difficulties. So my hope is that this work will continue to be very intensive and that our museum will increasingly have other opportunities to host such high-level scientific meetings. So I'd like to metaphorically hug you all. You see that our museum is very much focused on women and their role in research. So many thanks to our guests who have their specific research items. And as president of the museum, I'd like to thank you and thank also the audience, the public, for being here at such an important meeting. So thank you so much and all the best. Thank you, Mr. President.
Io invito la
Now,
assessora Segnana.
I'd like to invite local councillor for health of the province of Trento, Mrs. Segnana, to say a few words of welcome.
Buonasera a tutti.
Well, good evening. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'd like to say hello to our speakers. Welcome to Trentino. It's good to have such important scientists here in Trentino because you represent also women in science. So welcome to Trentino and congratulations for what you do. I would like to convey to you the greetings of the President of the province of Trento, Mr. Fugatti. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Sorry that I could not confirm my presence up to a few minutes ago. I'll try to be short to leave time to the speakers. So as a councillor for health, it's important for me to have such particular and important meetings. I'd like to say hello also to the health operators that I see here in the hall. Well, we've just gone through 2 very difficult years because of the COVID pandemic, and we as a health trust, a provincial health trust, had to face a lot of problems, including a very long waiting list. So I'd like to thank all the medical doctors and all the health operators who have continued to work and take care of women with cancer. So I'd like to thank them all for whatever they've done in this period. Well, we have a large number of women in our health trust. They are the pillars, so to say, of our health trust. So today is dedicated to women, and so I'd like to thank all the women who work in the health sector here in the province of Trento. So many thanks to them for their hard work. And I wish them all the best. And I wish all the best also to all those women who have cancer and have to face this problem. So thank you, and have a nice meeting.
Bene. E adesso
Very well. And now,
Pezcoller,
President Galligioni
dottoressa Karen Vousden
of the Pezcoller Foundation. Thank you, Mrs. Fama. Well, I've been told that I can remove this mask. Well, good evening. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting organized by Fondazione Pezcoller, together with the Museum of Science of Trento, to introduce to our community Dr. Karen Vousden. Is it Vousden or Vousden? Vousden. Vousden. Okay. Winner of the International Prize for Women in the area of cancer research. This award, set up by Fondazione Pezcoller in 2020 in collaboration with the European Association for Cancer Research, apart from recalling the importance of research for human health, as we have seen in these 2 years of COVID pandemic, wants to highlight all those who actually carry out this research, and in particular women who are increasingly numerous, but not completely recognized and acknowledged. So we have chosen the current date because it is the International Day for Women's Rights, because Karen Vousden, apart from her scientific merits, is carrying out important research on food and metabolism, in particular in relation to the development and growth of cancer. We know that diet is very important for health, and we also know that it is equally important to highlight the role of women in terms of educating and guiding food and diet right from the childhood. Now, during this meeting, we wanted to have this very important scientist, but also a young researcher, Dr. Francesca Lorenzin. And we wanted to do that to underline the importance given by the Fondazione Pezcoller to young researchers, because in the area of science, the contribution of fresh energy and innovative energy is very important, together with the knowledge and experience of more mature researchers. And finally, we cannot but think of what is happening in Ukraine and the sufferings of the people in Ukraine for a shameful and cruel war. I'd like to invite all of us to express our solidarity with the victims and contribute to stopping the aggressors, also joining all those who are asking for the stop of this brutal aggression. So thank you all for your presence, and many thanks to Dr. Vousden for being here with us, and have a nice meeting. Thank you.
Allora, ringrazio il professor Enzo Galligioni.
Thank you very much, Professor Galligioni.
Del MUSE.
Thank you to the president of MUSE. Thanks to the University of Trento for organizing this evening's event. And I would like to greet you also on behalf of the National Association Women in Science and the European Platform of Women Scientists, the Association of Associations that gathers more than 40 organizations of scientists, women all over Europe, with the purpose of being proactive as far as equal opportunities in the European Union are concerned. The 8th of March is the International Day of Women's Rights. So it is the best opportunity in a science museum to invite two researchers representing two different generations. An exchange will be particularly interesting. It will be interesting to get to know about their research, their life, their experience, their enthusiasm, the passion they have for what they do. And I am sure that listening to both of them,
io sono sicura che saranno un incentivo per le giovani donne.
Young women will find inspiration towards the scientific world in Italy and all over the world. We all know that in research, women scientists are often neglected, and I believe that it is important to also support those women who have chosen research as their own job.
In Italia soltanto
in Italy,
si laureano più del 59%,
more than 59%
soltanto il 16%, poco più, sceglie
of women
succede anche negli istituti tecnici.
Obtain a university degree, but only 17%
Poi questi numeri
chooses scientific subjects. On top of that,
che, per esempio,
when women start working,
una donna
only one woman out of 5
dell'università sono donne.
Sorry, 1 out of 5 university professors is a woman, and let alone being a dean or a rector of a university. So women are not very well represented. And this is due to several reasons. The European Union, since 1999, has launched several projects to investigate the situation and to resolve it, and is launching some research policies, amongst which there is also something new. Starting from this year, all institutes that aim at obtaining funds and contributions for scientific research will have to prove a cultural and a structural change to support gender equality in their institute. These are the so-called GEPs, Gender Equality Plans. So at European level, there is this very strong desire to fill in the gap within 2025. That's a target. So this year, the 8th of March, is celebrating this beautiful promise. But as we said before, we're celebrating this day in a very sad moment due to the war at the heart of Europe that is also affecting the scientific culture. Bombs are dropped in the center of science and culture, schools, universities, museums, and isolation of researchers, of scientists. Scientific societies all over the world are asking for more support to the Ukrainian scientific community and to Ukrainian women researchers, but also amongst Russian feminists and Russian scientists who have taken very strong stances against this war. And our solidarity goes to all those women who suffer from injustice and violence all over the world. And there's so many of them all over the world. So this evening, we have decided to present positive examples proving that women can improve the world through their research, and they can also improve our health. Without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Karen Vousden and Francesca Lorenzin, who will introduce themselves, who will tell us about their story, their passion, their studies, and what they're doing right now. And then we'll dig into greater depth into their own personal story. Thank you very much, Karen. You have the floor.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's organized this evening and who's been involved, the museum, the university, Pezcoller. It's just wonderful to be here. And I'm very grateful to be talking to you. Thank you all for coming. So, get this right. My slides are up. So I'm going to talk to you tonight a little bit about some of the work that we're doing at the moment. But what I'd like to start with is just to give you some background of how I got to where I am and, you know, the things that I did over the course of my career. So my work focused mainly in the United Kingdom and in America. So I was actually born very close to London, and I carried out almost all of my training in London. So I did my undergraduate degree and my PhD in London, and then I moved on to start a postdoctoral fellowship at the Institute of Cancer Research, where I started my interest and passion for understanding cancer. The picture there is a picture of me doing my PhD. So I wasn't always mature. I was young once too. After I finished my first postdoctoral fellowship, I moved to America to work at the National Cancer Institute. That's me again on my car, which I bought for $400. It was a wonderful car. And I spent some years there, and then I returned back to London because I was offered an opportunity to establish my own research group. And you can see me there with my research group. They didn't always dress like that, but we were going to a party. I spent quite a while there before moving back to America, where I had a bigger group, as you can see, and I became a laboratory chief at the National Cancer Institute. Then in 2002, I moved back to the United Kingdom, but this time to Glasgow, where I became the director of the Beatson Institute for Cancer Research. And what you can see there is me digging the first hole in the ground for the new institute that we built while I was there. Now, I am both a group leader at the Francis Crick Institute. You can see the Crick Institute there. It's a wonderful building, just as this is a wonderful building. And there are about 1,200 scientists working there. I'm also Chief Scientist for Cancer Research UK, the main funder of cancer research in the United Kingdom. So as I think back over where I've been, back and forward, and the things that I worked on, I take some satisfaction in seeing that I've actually worked and made very small contributions to some really important progress in cancer research. When I started my postdoctoral fellowship in London, I worked on understanding how genes in humans can become mutated to actually drive cancers. So they're called oncogenes, and probably the best known of those is the RAS oncogene, which we discovered in the lab that I worked in, one of the versions of the RAS oncogene. It's mutated in about 30% of all cancers, so that's a lot. And now we're beginning to develop, other people, cleverer people than me, are beginning to develop drugs that can actually inactivate the RAS protein and so help in the treatment of cancer. While I was in America, I worked on human papillomaviruses. I was interested in which genes in the human papillomavirus could contribute to making cells become cancerous. And as I'm sure you all know, the human papillomavirus is very strongly associated and actually causes or predisposes to the development of several cancers, including cervical cancer in women. So again, moving on, I left this field, but since then, there's been remarkable progress, and now there's a vaccine against human papillomavirus, and I think that over the next couple of decades, we will see cervical cancer eradicated from those countries that are fortunate enough to be able to get this vaccine. Going back then to the middle part of my career, I spent a long time working on another gene that's mutated in cancers. This one, called P53, is changed in pretty much every cancer, I think. And I spent a long time working on this, trying to understand how P53 is regulated. In this case, P53 actually normally stops cancers from developing. And so what cancers do is they lose this activity. And some of the work that I've done has developed small molecules, drugs, that might help to reactivate P53 in some cancers. And that work on P53 actually led me to the work that I'm doing at the moment, which is to try and understand how metabolism works in cancers. How do cancers obtain the nutrients that they need in order to grow and become abnormal and move to other places in the body? And so this is really the focus of my laboratory at the moment, to understand metabolism, diet, and cancer. So I think we can all agree that diet is closely linked to health, and that various aspects of diet can be extremely unhealthy. For example, diet-induced obesity is becoming a massive problem worldwide. And more people now die due to overeating than through starvation. So we can see how important this aspect of diet really is to overall health. Despite that, we really don't know an awful lot about how diet affects health and what the best diet really is. And that hasn't stopped governments and many organizations trying to tell people what they should eat. You'll see that back in the 1980s, many governments, including the United States government, United Kingdom government, were very strong in telling people that you should eat mostly carbohydrates and almost no fat. So this vilification of fat led to an explosion in foods that are available to us that are low fat. You see these in all the supermarkets: low-fat yogurt, low-fat milk, low-fat cheese, low-fat everything. Making up for fat, many of these foods include carbohydrates, including sugars. And there's a very strong feeling now that this advice has actually contributed to that explosion in obesity that we see around the world. Now, if we move forward, more recent dietary advice is actually almost the complete opposite. We should eat very little carbohydrate, small amounts of bread and rice and pasta, and much, much more fatty foods: meat, eggs, fats, cheese. But again, is this the right advice? We still don't really know. And dietary advice is constantly shifting and changing. This is summed up here, where the doctor is saying, good news, your cholesterol has stayed the same, but the research findings have changed. Really just to highlight that we don't really know what to tell patients when they ask, doctor, what should I eat? So if we move to cancer then, we see that diet can also be very important for cancer. We know that many cancers actually probably could be prevented if we changed the way that we lived. So we all know about smoking, sun exposure, the importance of limiting alcohol intake and taking more exercise. But diet and weight are very clearly associated with the development of many kinds of cancer. If you look at obesity again, for example, we see that obesity increases the risk of many different types of cancers. They're shown here. Not all cancers, interestingly, but many of the main ones. Indeed, we can see that around 15 to 20% of cancer deaths are linked with obesity. So, although it seems to make sense that in order to limit your own risk of developing cancer, you might want to maintain a healthy weight, again, we still don't really know why obesity is linked with cancer in this way. So it's probably, the reason we don't know is because it's very complicated. We know that both diet, eating certain foods, and obesity can affect the body in many different ways. These can be effects on the cells themselves that might turn into cancers, and, for example, driving oxidative stress. It can be effects on the whole body, the metabolic and hormonal balances of the entire body, or driving inflammation and changing immune function, or even changes in billions of bacteria that live in our intestines, that live in our gut, and that play such an important role in allowing us to remain healthy. So I think we know fairly clearly that diet and obesity can increase cancer risk, even if we don't quite know how. But we've been thinking about a different aspect of diet and cancer, which is, can we design bespoke diets that might help treat existing cancers? So we're not talking about risk of cancers developing here, but we're talking about the treatment of people who come in who have already been diagnosed with cancer. And we strongly believe that this is possible, but that it will need a precision approach, something that we like to think of as precision nutrition, because we think that probably the diet is going to have to be designed specifically for different cancers in different organs in different people. So the bottom line is that we need to do more basic research. We really need to understand the mechanisms, what controls the nutritional requirements of cancers, and to understand how we might be able to target these. So I'm nearly finished now. We know, for example, that cancers interact with the whole body in order to satisfy their nutritional demands. Cancers have a very high demand for nutrients. Of course they do. They're dividing, they're spreading, they're doing all kinds of abnormal things. And so we know that cancers change their own metabolism, but cancers also force the whole body to change its metabolism in order for the body to be able to feed the cancers. Now, we also know that the availability of nutrients to the cancer can be affected by changing the diet. And so our question is, can we design diets that will help to starve the cancer specifically, based on the fact that these cancers have very unusual demands for certain nutrients? So I'm not going to go into any more detail, but I just want to tell you that we are beginning to make progress. And in fact, there are a number of different examples, which I've shown here, where if we think about specific types of cancers, cancers from specific types of organs, and we look at which types of therapy are generally used to treat those cancers, we can start to predict which nutritional changes might help make that drug treatment more effective. And what we're talking about here is either taking away or adding specific nutrients that we know will be particularly effective in treating various types of cancer. And these types of approaches are actually already in clinical trials, so I think this will be possible. So I'm going to stop there. I just need, obviously, to thank a lot of people. I don't do this myself. My laboratory do all the good work. The people that I mention here, Mylène, Oliver, Mark, and Stian, have really been involved in this dietary approach I'm talking about. I also, of course, have to thank the people who fund me, all those wonderful people who give me money to run my lab. And finally, of course, a big thanks to Pezcoller, European Association of Cancer Research, for giving me this wonderful award. As I say, it's really a reflection of a whole army of people's work, and I'm just the lucky recipient sitting in front of you today. Thank you.
Grazie Karen. Grazie.
Thank you, Karen.
Qualche approfondimento dopo
We will have questions after Francesca's presentation, who will tell us about
Thank you.
her work.
Ecco qui.
Grazie, buonasera a tutti. Sarà un po' più
Thank you,
di quella della presentazione.
and good evening. I would like to start by telling you my story. I've never questioned my interest in biology and molecular biology in particular. And during my process, during my life, I've tried to focus on this issue, taking up different viewpoints. I graduated at the University of Padova in molecular biology and health biology, and my first experience in a research laboratory was at the Stockholm University, where I studied the proteins involved in repairing DNA in yeast. And then I realized that my real interest was cancer and biology of cancer, and so I went to Würzburg in Germany, where I tried to study how certain factors change tumor cells. And then in my postdoc period, I moved to Trento, to CIBIO,
applicato più
where I did more applied research, and I tried to see how to exploit specific mutations to develop new treatment strategies. Now, during this experience, I had the opportunity to participate
a un premio per giovani
in a prize, in a reward for young researchers given by the Cancer Foundation, and this helped me go on with my research.
filo conduttore della mia ricerca
Now, the common thread in this research has been the study of transcription factors in tumor cells. What are transcription factors? Well, DNA
della nostra informazione custodisce tutte le informazioni che
includes all the information which defines our characteristics and all the instructions which enable the operation of our cells. The functional unity of DNA is the gene, and
disponibile per la cellula
in order to make this information available, the specific sequence of DNA has to be transferred into mRNA and then translated into a protein. Our genetic heritage is the same in all the cells.
quello che permette
And so what
funzioni diverse
enables a cell to differentiate
vengono utilizzate nelle
is due to the type of genes which are used in the various cells and to the extent of production of a protein. The transcription factors are proteins which bind with DNA and which can modulate these aspects. That is, what genes will be expressed and how much protein will be expressed by each gene. A particularly important gene
fattore di trascrizione
or transcription factor for our research is the androgen receptor, AR.
degli androgeni
In a normal prostate cell, AR is expressed, but in order to be active, it has to bind testosterone and DHT. When the androgen go into the cell, they bind the DNA and regulate the expression of genes and proteins, which are very important for the function and survival of the organ.
nella cellula tumorale
In prostate cancer, the same activation system is maintained, and the activity of AR is amplified. And so we can monitor the production of proteins such as PSA in order to monitor the health of this organ.
le terapie a disposizione
Now, treatment. In order to treat prostate cancer, well, we use the dependence of prostate cells from AR, and so we try to deactivate AR in two ways. The first is to reduce the levels of androgens, and the second system is to inhibit the link between AR and androgens. Well, different resistance mechanisms have been reported, and the most recent one involves the microbiota, which is the mix of organisms which live in our guts, in our intestine, and which can vary depending on our diet and depending on the habits that we have, and also depending on the treatments. Well, this lab has discovered that some microorganisms can metabolize the precursors of testosterone and so produce testosterone, which can activate AR and so support the growth of cancer.
la descrizione di processi come questi di resistenza
So the description of such processes underlines the importance of new therapies in order to fight this type of tumor. This concept is very important, and we have the concept of synthetic lethality, which means the interaction between two genetic elements, that is, inactivation of two genes, which, if taken alone, have no effect on genes, on cell survival, but if they are present at the same time, they lead to death of cells. This notion has been used for anti-cancer therapies. And it can be applied to tumors because tumor cells are characterized by specific mutations which cannot be found in healthy tissue.
This gives sensitivity to the inhibition of a second gene or a synthetic lethality by means of a pharmacological approach. This concept has a very important example in the interaction of genes BRCA2 and BRCA1 and the olaparib inhibitors. So the discovery of synthetic lethality has brought the EMA to authorize treatment of patients with different types of tumors with the BRCA1 and 2 mutations, a treatment by means of olaparib. Given the success of this therapeutic strategy, we decided to use it also for prostate cancer, specifically for one of the aberrations which is most frequently seen in prostatic cancer. That has to do with the ERG transcription factor. The ERG gene in the prostate is fused together with androgen receptor regulated genes. And in this way, we have a high ERG expression in the prostate tissue, leading to the development of tumor. Since 2005, the year of this discovery, several papers have been published that have clarified the role of ERG in prostate cancer, as well as the mechanisms leading to the development of this tumor. This discovery has also been recently recognized by the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences that has given a prize to Dr. Chimayan, the author of this research work. But there are two aspects that make ERG particularly interesting from a therapeutic viewpoint. Number one, the high frequency of its mutation, and number two, the fact that its inhibition leads to cell death. However, it is very difficult to directly inhibit ERG due to its own structure. So synthetic lethality could be the winning approach, since we are not directly inactivating ERG, but we inactivate its partner in synthetic lethality via a pharmacological approach. To identify the synthetic lethality partner, we have been pursuing a double approach in the last 3 years. One is based on the genomic study of tumors, and the other one is a molecular approach based on the screening of the genes that are necessary for the survival of ERG-positive tumor cells. And in this way, we hope to identify a new pharmacological target for the treatment of patients with prostate tumor, which is ERG positive. Before concluding, I would like to thank the supporters of this research work, Professor De Michelis and the colleagues of the Cellular, Computational and Integrative Department of Biology, Pezcoller Foundation and MUSE for giving me the opportunity to be here this evening, and you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Grazie Francesca.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Well, we've seen very interesting things that really open up therapeutic prospects. So I would like to ask a couple of questions. First question to Karen. You talked about metabolism. Is there any difference between men's and women's metabolism? Can you expand on that?
Well, yes. There's lots of differences between men and women, including their metabolism. Clearly, there are major hormonal differences between men and women, and that's one of the ways, that's one of the drivers of differences in metabolism. Men and women certainly have quite different responses to the hormones and have different hormones as well. And it's known that men are more susceptible to metabolic diseases, Men have more diabetes, they have more obesity, more insulin resistance. And that is in part a reflection of differences in metabolism and hormones. For example, estrogen protects from these diseases. We also know that women metabolize the food they eat quite differently. They metabolize fat and carbohydrates differently, and they accumulate fat in different parts of their body. Women tend to accumulate subcutaneous fat, where men accumulate visceral fat, and we're different shapes, so we see this. So we know that men and women are different and their metabolism is different, but how that then relates to their risk of developing cancer, we really have very little idea. So it's a very important and interesting research topic that we need to start working on.
Quindi pensi che in un futuro
So do you believe that in the future,
per migliorare la salute
to improve women's and men's health,
un metabolismo differente ci
who
sarà
have a different metabolism, do you believe that research will focus more on this different metabolism?
e capire perché soprattutto
Especially to understand why there are such differences.
So I think that's absolutely right. I think that at the heart of our being able to use any of our research to treat patients, we need to understand why and the mechanism. But I don't think it's as straightforward as all women look like this and all men look like that. There are many variations in different people, in populations. And I think men and women are just one example of how people, different groups of people, are different. So, I think it's an interesting topic, but I don't think it will be more important than looking at other variations that we see amongst the whole human population.
capito. Ecco, invece Francesca, tu ci hai già un pochino accennato delle
Francesca, you have already hinted to the prospects of your research in the medical field and in the pharmacological field.
vedi
I mean, how do you see your future in 10 years? What is going to happen?
cosa avremo capito
What are you going to study? How can we be able to cure ourselves better, to treat ourselves better?
C'è il nostro
Wow, that's a difficult question.
è un nuovo
It is our dream to find a new therapeutic target for patients suffering from prostate cancer.
principalmente
And we focus predominantly
più avanzato e più
on the advanced
statico resistente.
stage, which is the metastatic stage, which is castration resistant.
Una piccola frazione di loro
A
possono
small percentage of these patients can be treated
o l'APRI perché
with olaparib
nei geni
because they have BRCA1 and 2 mutations.
possono essere
Others,
con gli
few, can be treated with immune therapy,
immunodeprimanti.
but the remaining part
Non è stata ancora identificata una terapia specifica.
has no specific therapy. There is no specific target.
Quello è un campo completamente
And that's a totally new field,
attiva ricerca.
and is a field of active research right now.
Ci concentriamo
And this is where we are going to focus on. So hopefully in 10 years, we will have new strategies
sulla parte di pazienti
to cure
essere
those patients who cannot be cured or treated today.
E
Thank you.
vorrei chiedervi adesso
I would like to ask you
particolarmente interessante
the following question. What is particularly interesting in your research? What are you passionate about?
Oh, that's quite easy. I'm passionate about all research. Being a research scientist must be the best job in the world. It's exciting. You're discovering things. We're going to places where nobody has ever been. Every morning you come to the lab and you think, today I might discover something completely new. No one will ever have known this before. So that I find that incredibly attractive and motivating. Added to that, of course, the area that we work in has the extra bonus that we might actually be able to help people with cancer. And so it's very exciting to me to think that, you know, some of the work that I've done in the past, as I tried to explain, even though I was a very, very small part of it, nevertheless has contributed to some developments that are now helping to treat millions of people worldwide. So that's wonderful too.
E per quanto riguarda te, Francesca?
Non avrei saputo
What about you, Francesca?
veramente come
Well, I couldn't have said it in a better way. I absolutely agree with
non so se
Dr. Vousden's words. And also
molto per lavoro di
the fact of traveling a lot, of being in contact with many people
questo lavoro di
who do my same job, exchanging opinions, getting to know many new people, that's another fascinating aspect of my job.
Beh, allora vorrei chiedervi adesso qual è la soddisfazione
Well, my next question, which was the high satisfaction that research gave you in your field and in your activities?
maggioritato?
Which was the result that was mostly satisfying for you?
Well, I think one of the results that really excited me was, you know, I've spoken to you about diet and our ideas, and we had done quite a lot of work that had shown us that there's one particular amino acid, a small nutrient called serine, that is particularly important to cancer cells when we grow them in a dish. And we thought maybe this could work in a whole animal. To be honest, it was my postdoc who wanted to do this experiment, and it was me that said, no, this won't work. But it did work. So we created a diet that didn't have serine. We fed it to a mouse that had a tumor, many mice actually, and the tumors grew much more slowly than in our animals that had a normal diet. So I found that surprising, astonishing, and incredibly exciting.
E questo, se non sbaglio, è stato anche un risultato che avete pubblicato in un articolo molto importante.
And you've published this also recently, if I'm not mistaken, is that right?
Yes, actually the first paper we published in 2013, so that's nearly 10 years ago. We have had a few more recent publications, yes. We also have set up a small company with colleagues that's trying to take forward this idea of matching diet and tumor and therapy in patients. So we have some of our diets in clinical trials now.
E per quanto riguarda te, Francesca, cosa ci dici?
per me è stato sicuramente
What about you, Francesca?
il premio dato dalla Prostate Cancer Foundation, non solo perché era la prima volta in cui mi mettevo in gioco e quindi avevo preso il rischio di scrivere un progetto e di sottometterlo, ed era un progetto che era un'idea che avevo pensato io, è un progetto che avevo sviluppato io e scritto io, quindi sottometterla a una comunità così importante, al giudizio degli altri, e vederlo riconosciuto e poi ottenere il premio è stato sicuramente una delle maggiori soddisfazioni. E poi non solo il fatto che delle persone che leggono il tuo CV e leggono il tuo progetto e credono in quel progetto decidono di finanziarti. La cosa magari anche più bella della fondazione che mi sta finanziando è che ti permette di entrare in una comunità di ricercatori che hanno tutti lo stesso obiettivo, quindi di studiare il tumore alla prostata e di trovare nuove terapie, e quindi riuscire a interagire sia con i massimi esperti di questo campo, ma anche con persone come me che sono i primi, che stanno muovendo i primi passi.
Able to
Sicuramente
work in that area, well, that was really satisfactory. Well, research, however, doesn't only have positive, good results, because a lot of research is based on failures or things that really do not satisfy us. So how do you react to these things? Because there are those who also study the depression of scientists, of researchers, these ups and downs, these long periods of work, which perhaps doesn't lead to any results. So what is your reaction to these situations?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I sometimes think doing research is like playing the slot machines in Las Vegas. You simply believe that the next time you will get the good result. And it can be very, very upsetting and depressing and demoralizing when work doesn't go the way that you hoped that it would. You get used to it over the years. You develop a thick skin. And also, of course, you have the comfort and the support of your colleagues who are all going through the same thing. So, you know, we support each other through those difficult times. But you are absolutely right. You have to have a certain crazy mentality to be able to do this job.
E hai avuto qualche caso in cui
Well, did you have any cases where you had to completely abandon a given research work because there was no possibility to progress?
Maybe small areas, but I've never really had, I don't think many people completely abandon a whole area of research. I think it would have to be pretty bad to give up altogether. I mean, we move slightly sideways, but we don't give up altogether.
Beh, a te Francesca è successo di avere qualche...
So what about you, Francesca? Did you have any obstacles, any failures? Well, I had many obstacles, many bad results, and I share my depression with my colleagues, and then we try to support each other, of course, and then we go on. We continue to work hard, and we hope to find a positive, a good result, which then gives you the boost to go on and face the future and also possible negative results. Karen. Well, earlier on, Professor Galligioni explained that you received a very important award, the award of Marina Larger Fogazzaro for your important results. And this award has also been granted to you because you are a woman in the field of research. So what is the aspect of being a woman in research? Can you tell us something?
Oh, yes. So I've been very, very fortunate throughout my career in that I have actually never really experienced any negativity towards me or any negative impact because I'm a woman. You know, the most important people that supported me throughout my career were men. And I've gone really through my life simply refusing to believe that I can't do anything I want to do. I've never particularly made an effort to differentiate on people, whether they're a man or a woman. I've always treated everybody the same in my lab. I expect the same of everybody. So it's actually was quite a surprise to me several years ago when my younger colleagues, women colleagues, actually came to me and told me what an inspiration and role model I was, because I'd never really tried to be that. But I do think that you simply have to believe that you can do what you want to do. You know, I think that's just such an important attitude to take with you. People, you know, I often say this, in Britain, I come from what's considered the lower classes. And I think that I have had more negative comments to me about the way that I speak than I have about being a woman. So I think everybody faces some prejudice, everybody faces some difficulties and barriers. It's not just women. I think that we shouldn't focus so much on women, but try to make sure that everybody has equal opportunities.
Quindi l'importanza dell'inclusione e delle differenze. Ma quindi in questo premio è stato riconosciuto.
So in your award, in this award, your role as a mentor has been recognized. And have you had any people, any persons who have been an example, a role model for you, a mentor for you?
People who were mentors for me were really my first postdoc supervisor, Christopher Marshall, who taught me what incredible fun and privilege doing research was. You know, he really fired up that passion for research in me. And my second important mentor was when I was in America the second time, the director of our institute, George van der Wood, who had absolute faith in me and my abilities, not only as a scientist, but also as a leader. And he gave me my first opportunity to direct an institute. And that, of course, is incredibly important. And I would say that for both of them, the thing that was so special is they believed in me more than I ever believed in myself. They gave me a push when I needed it. They weren't always nice to me. Chris made me cry. But they gave me a push when I needed it, and they gave me a hand when I needed the hand to be helped. And I think that was just incredibly important to me and helped me enormously.
E tu pensi che
So do you think that in terms of your attitude in coordinating and in guiding your group, because you said that your collaborators like to work with you, well, have those people been a source of inspiration for you? And have you also adopted their methods, their systems, or do you think that you have a specific personal method?
One thing that I learned very early is that I thought that when you have, the job of looking after people and mentoring them and supervising them, that it would be important for me to treat them the way that I would have liked to have been treated. And I learned very quickly that that's wrong. And you have to understand how people themselves want to be treated. So everybody is different. Everybody needs different things. You can encourage one person in a certain way. Another person needs something completely different. So I think what I learned from my mentors was that you need to treat each person as an individual and just do everything that you can to get the best out of them.
E tu, Francesca, hai avuto
What about you, Francesca? Did you have people who have been role models for you? Yes, I was as lucky as to do my postdoc research and the PhD in internationally acknowledged laboratories. And the leaders of these laboratories used their time to give advice to me, to support me, to help me, but also to criticize me in a very constructive and positive way. So how to write an article, how to present some data. And they perhaps highlighted some weak points in terms of my personality and helped me improve. Well, that is very important. It was important and it is important, not only for this job, but in general as a person. Well, before opening to the public, I'd like to make a final question. Well, in the laboratory, sometimes very strange things happen, funny things. I remember, for example, fires exploding. So do you have any story to tell, any strange things that happened during your work?
Well, I don't know whether I've destroyed many centrifuges in my life, but we won't go there. I don't know about in the lab, but you know, one of the reasons I think I've been able to be successful is that I have a very supportive husband who works in the lab with me. So we both work together. And several years ago, I was lucky enough to be the recipient of the gold medal from the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And that meant that I was able to have lunch with the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, who of course is the husband of the Queen, our Queen. And my husband came with us, and he was talking to Prince Philip, and Prince Philip said to him, "Oh, I understand that you work for your wife." And my husband said, "Yes, I do, and I understand you work for your wife too." Which I thought was a good response.
E tu, Francesca, hai qualche cosa da raccontare?
So what about you, Francesca? Do you have anything funny to tell us? Well, one funny thing that happened to me is that I participated in a conference and I had to put on a false mustache or some masks and participate in the
Oppure di partecipare a una
lesson about the funniest person or another congress where we had a competition about funny things. Well, those were exercises that were proposed to us in order to promote communication and partnership between young researchers. And it was a specific session, so it was a very funny thing.
Mi è sembrato di capire che nel vostro lavoro
So you have also a lot of fun during your work. We saw your collaborators, and also you were so proud to show us your beautiful car. I also had a beautiful car in California.
questo entusiasmo di far
So, you know that I understand that you feel enthusiastic, very passionate about all these things. Okay, now let's see if there are questions.
Ecco, arriva il microfono.
Grazie anzitutto per l'entusiasmo che hanno messo
Well, many thanks for the enthusiasm, passion in talking about research. I'm an old clinician. I also did some research during my life, not at your level, of course. I published something, and I also had some disappointments. Now, my question. Now, you spoke about microbiota earlier on. I am a dermatologist,
microbiota cutaneo.
and I'm very much interested in the microbiota. And I have understood that the gut microbiota plays a role in the immune defense of the body. I'd like to know if you know something more about the relationship between diet, microbiota, and immune defense. And the question is for Karen? Okay. Yeah, for both of them. Both of them.
Allora, prego.
I have to be honest, it's not something I know a huge amount about. Clearly, there's a link between diet and the types of bacteria that you have in your intestines. The diet can affect those, although maybe not as easily as some of the companies that sell drinks of bacteria for you to change your microbiome. The microbiome is important in every aspect of us. You know, there are so many bacteria and different microorganisms in our gut and also elsewhere, of course, on our skin, in our lungs. And from my point of view, the metabolism there massively influences what circulates in your bloodstream, and that will affect everything, including, of course, the immune response. So, you know, again, this is an area of a lot of research, but I don't think we're really quite at the point where we understand all of that. You know more than me, I'm sure.
I don't think I know more than you. No, I just know that example, and that is that the research is very promising on that, but I'm not really an expert.
Ah, giusto, sì, è vero. Non me ne ero accorta neanch'io.
I didn't realize you were speaking in English.
Ricerca che sta prendendo
Sure.
molto piede.
I just said that this research field is actually expanding. It is a very important one, and there are many studies. One has been recently published showing the immunotherapy reaction and response and the connection with the microbiome.
Della composizione del microbioma.
And according to the composition of the microbiome, some differences have been observed. However, results were not reproducible in different cohorts of patients. And it is not known which are the most important characteristics of the microbiome to give advantages or disadvantages in terms of the immune response. All this still has to be further investigated and researched. Very good, thank you. Any other questions?
Vedo una mano alzata.
I can see a hand down there.
Hello, so I have a question for Karen. So I've been reading a few years back a book from Servan Schreibert. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So he is basically, he was a French doctor who died from brain cancer. And well, he first had a surgery where they removed the cancer. And then he started to pay, after that, a lot of attention to his diet. He's also citing some work from, I don't remember exactly whom, but who are working on different foods that you could use for, well, basically helping you to prevent getting cancer. And he's citing a lot of work from studies on not micrometastasis, but like basically when you still have like circulating cancer cells that are not developing into solid tumor. And he's talking a lot about anti-inflammatory diets used particularly in Japan and other parts of Asia, where apparently people seem to, well, have a lower risk of developing cancer. Can you maybe, do you know about any of this, and can you give some more details? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, so clearly a lot of the evidence that diet affects cancer risk comes from exactly the kinds of examples that you give, that, you know, Japanese women have a much lower incidence of breast cancer until they move to America and adopt an American diet, and then they start to increase their... There's lots of these correlations, but as I said earlier, I think unless we actually know how and why this works, it's going to be very difficult to understand exactly how we can use that information to improve, either lower people's risk or improve people's outlook once they've developed cancer. I have to say, this is an area that, as you probably all know, is very fraught with poor science. Not that I'm suggesting that your example is one, but you know, you can find all kinds of promises about if you eat more lettuce and less carrots and less bacon and more toast, you'll never get cancer. I mean, there's even, you know, very important people suggesting that bleach may be something that would be useful for the treatment of various illnesses. So I think one of the reasons why we're so concerned to really understand why things happen is because we don't want to simply base our work on correlations. We want to base our work on evidence, and that takes much, much more time and is much more difficult.
Well, and I guess one point which you also talked about is that probably this differs a lot based on each individual. So I think this is, well, a major challenge and goes into the personalized medicine field in general, right? So.
Yes, yes.
So it will be very tricky to kind of, well, figure out how you are going to divide your subgroups, right? I suppose.
Yes.
Dice, c'è una domanda lì?
There's a question there. No?
Volevo chiedere un parere su
I would like to know your opinion
la pandemia, se
regarding the fact that during the pandemics,
di dialogo tra il mondo della ricerca
the world of research has had some difficulties in talking to society, to non-experts. There have been some misunderstandings, both regarding the timing of research, which may be very time-consuming, whereas public opinion demands quick answers, for instance, regarding the topics of the pandemic, and also the fact that research does not always have black and white answers. Sometimes there are some gray ones. And we've seen this remarkably during the pandemic. So in your opinion, which part of society, research, politics, journalism, should actually focus more on a dialogue between these two components, and which are the possible solutions to promote scientific dissemination and clearer and more transparent communication?
Chi vuole rispondere? Qual è il vostro parere su questo come
So which is your opinion as researchers about this problem?
I mean, I absolutely agree with you that this is a problem, and I find it incredibly frustrating that we went from essentially a new disease to having a vaccine effective against that disease, or having a multitude of vaccines using entirely new technologies within a year, and vaccinated entire populations, and we get no real credit for that. Now, this should have been the moment when everybody in the world looked at science and research and said, I understand it, I get it, this is important, let's spend more money on this. But sadly, the things that didn't go so well, as you alluded to, seem to have become a bigger issue. And people have just accepted, yeah, vaccine, whatever, that's easy. So I think it's important for all of the people that you talked about, the scientists, the politicians, the journalists, and the educators, to help us bridge that gap. You know, I think we need to be better at teaching science. We need to make children excited by science. You know, the statistic you gave that so many women go to university and yet only 1 in 5 does a science degree. We have the same thing in the UK. And you know in your heart that's because, you know, women are thinking, yeah, it's too difficult, I can't do that. And it's just not true. It's not any more difficult than anything else. So I think that the more we can educate, I know it's a long-term solution, the more people will understand and appreciate what science and research actually brings. But I think we do a very bad job on our side of explaining that to people. So the fault is in both camps.
Pensi così?
Sì, penso così. È molto difficile per noi comunicare le nostre scoperte e comunicarlo nel modo giusto. C'è anche...
It's important to communicate in the right way, and
dati da laboratori diversi.
sometimes results seem different or contrasting, but that doesn't mean that the two laboratories or one of the laboratories is wrong, but simply that the things are studied from a different viewpoint. So it's only if you go in depth that you really understand what the truth is, but that takes time and a lot of research. Certainly. And also to communicate uncertainty is the challenge. You need to have a lot of trust. So we are perfectly on time. Congratulations for keeping to the time allotted. So a final question? Okay.
Prima del messaggio finale.
Before the final message. So my question is for Dr. Vousden.
Cos'è che vuole fare o quale obiettivo vuole raggiungere?
What is your objective before concluding your scientific career? So what is the final objective? What is your dream before closing? I hope that your career will be as long as possible, but so what is your final dream?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, my final dream would be never to stop. I can't imagine not doing this. I can't imagine not, people talk about a work-life balance, but my work is my life. The people around me, I'm kept young by all of my young trainees. As I said earlier, the excitement of the work, going to meetings, talking about science, it's just such a wonderful thing to do. I just never really want to stop.
So we wish you a Nobel Prize.
Beh, allora, come conclusione,
well, today is the 8th of March. That is the Day of Women. A very special day for women, not only in science, but for all women. So, do you have a final message as a woman, as a scientist? So, a message in the bottle to take home. So, just a few words. Thank you.
If I have a message to young scientists, women, men, everything in between, is to say, be brave. Everybody's scared. You will be scared. But follow your dream. You can do it. You will do it. Don't let fear hold you back from reaching for the stars.
Ottimo. E tu, Francesca? Che messaggio
Great. What is your message, Francesca?
che vuoi lasciarci?
A take-home message.
I giovani ricercatori.
Well, for young researchers, both men and women, well, my message is to try and have good mentors and then a network of people who support you, who help you, and who guide you. And for those who are younger than me, not to be afraid of facing challenges, as also Karen said. Thank you.
So you have already spoken about the papillomavirus, which was also another very interesting aspect. So thank you very much to both our speakers, Karen Vousden and Francesca